Hello everyone and welcome back to the Homebrew Workshop. In this video we're going to take a look at Carpenters Tools and see what we know about them within D&D 5e as it currently stands, and take a look at how we can make them more interesting for our own home games. Without any further ado, let's kind of dive into Carpenters Tools. So what do we know about Carpenters Tools in D&D right now? We know that they're a tool that weighs 6 pounds, they cost 8 gold pieces to buy, and they allow you to add your proficiency bonus to another check if applicable. This in and of itself is interesting, but not necessarily enough to make them a compelling source for at-home play. So let's take a look at what we can do to make them more interesting. We're going to have 2 objectives. The first objective is going to be how can we make these tools something that you can use as a trade where you can earn money. Now that's interesting in and of itself because you have tradesmen within the world that need to be able to earn their own money during this window, and so carpenters as a profession shouldn't have to go and do other jobs potentially because of their skills as a carpenter. It should be a full-time career should you choose to pursue it. So let's make it a system where you can use these tools as a trade in and of itself to earn money during your downtime. During your downtime window, should you have access to Carpenter's Tools, you can use collected raw wood throughout the world from your adventure and utilize it to make a variety of different creations. These creations can be from any type of wood reflected into a few different tiers based on their rarity. These wood types can also be combined to increase the overall value of the creation as a whole. But first things first, a creation size must be chosen before any given project. You can choose a tiny, small, or even medium-sized creation that you can carry, allowing you to be able to take this actually on the road as a progressive kind of construction along the way. But nothing that's ending up being too big is going to be reasonable to take with you on kind of an adventure. It would be something that you leave at home and return to potentially to continue work on. However, you can state sizes that are larger than medium. You can choose a large, huge, or gargantuan level project. That's all right. It's just, hard to travel with anything more than medium, which is what typical people would actually be, right? You will have your odd Goliath or Furbolg or Gnome or Halfling, but typically a number of the races that you can play are medium in size, and so a medium construction already rivals your capability of transportation. Otherwise, once you've chosen a project, the DM will categorize it in terms of its own size. So you can say, in not mechanical terms, but you can say, I want to build a wall within a space so that it is a room. I want to take this alcove and put a wall in. You can choose to do that, and then the DM will make a ruling on what the actual size would be for this carpentry construction. And you can end up choosing what filigree or other things you want to do from there. But the work can be completed over the course of a longer period, hour by hour as necessary, once that time has been chosen. The project size and commitments table shows the project size in and of itself and the wood units that are required and the rough estimate of how many pounds the project in and of itself would actually be once it is completed. So if you were to have a tiny project or smaller, it will be at maximum 68 pounds. That means that there's potential for it to be a 5 foot by 5 foot cubes worth of space of wood, which allows for density of wood to be relatively heavy. But at gargantuan sizes, it could be 450 or more pounds, and so you can kind of lean anywhere within there, and the DM will make a judgment call on how much the actual weight of a project might end up being. At the very next kind of column over, you have time in days. And so if you have a tiny project, for example, again, you'll need the 3 wood units. It'll weigh around that 68 or less pounds, and it'll take you 1d4 plus 2 days to complete. Just based on your own capabilities, and that's assuming 8 hours of a work day. So 1d4 plus 2 is 8 hours per day. That way it's not 24 hours or something else to be misconstrued. The quality of the carving during the window is reflected by a total number of skill checks equal to the number of work days that it'll take to complete the project. You can end up using whatever skills that you want. The skill checks that are applicable are determined by the DM, but you can suggest whatever you would want that you think might actually be useful. For example, if you're carving nature or anything kind of like an animal or nature scene into wood, nature check may be applicable. However, if you're trying to come up with the lever or something else that has no other bearing, potentially even in design, nature check isn't necessarily going to be helpful, and so your DM can say, not quite, but try this instead. That's kind of how that works. As you complete them, the outcomes of the check can affect the completion time for the project, however, and each check is a DC 10, with each success progressing the project by 1 day. Each failure progresses the project by 1 day as well, but decreases the total gold piece value of the piece by 5 gold pieces. A natural 20, of course, counts as 2 successes and adds 10 gold pieces to the final value of the project, and a natural 1 counts as 2 failures, having the same kind of situation as a normal failure might. For the project to be successfully completed, you must succeed at least half of your total skill checks. Otherwise, you end up having to take additional time to actually complete your project. So, going back to kind of the tiered wood values, you have tier 1, 2, and 3. Each one is a gold piece value for cubic foot. Each cubic foot is treated as 1 wood unit. And so if you have a tier 1, that's going to be most of your common woods, as you can see on the wood types and values table. You can see the common woods, and then uncommon woods are tier 2, and exotic woods are the tier 3 value. Tier 1 is 10 gold pieces per unit itself, Tier 2 is 50 gold pieces per unit, and Tier 3 is 100 gold pieces per unit. So that way, if you were to try to be, procuring these resources as raw lumber, this is the estimated rough value that someone would be able to sell these units to you for. On top of that, if you were to collect them, this is the value that you have collected based on how much you're able to actually collect over that window. So, if we jump back into kind of the actual failures and success of your different checks, if you succeed and you have high quality wood or multiple different kinds of wood, you can end up taking as a total value the total number of units that you needed, the gold pieces of each unit that's valued there, and then the modified value of what you get for your skill check. So if all things go well, you complete the process by a day, you progress it by the 1 day, and then you move on from there and either add gold piece value, or end up kind of leaning into a failure and losing gold piece value at the end. So it's kind of a tracking project that if you do have a much larger time-intensive project, will need quite a bit of effort to work on, and kind of keep track of your progress, but otherwise allows you to have a means by which you can actually construct things. Once the project is completed, you can also make some alterations and additions to improve the value of the piece itself. You can undertake any of the additional treatments in the additional treatments table here. The completed project increases the piece value by the associated amount. So you can end up doing any or multiple or all depending on the actual kind of steps here. For example, you can stain, but then it doesn't necessarily make sense to paint. You can lacquer or waterproof or anything else, but potentially there's a chance that if you do one, you can't necessarily do any of the others. You can see the different kind of gold piece value additions. If you were to simply stain or paint your piece once it is completed, and this is the key word, is once completed, you can end up adding 10 gold pieces to the overall value of the entire piece. And you can't do this additional treatment multiple times on the same piece. You can only do it just the once. So if you stain it as an additional treatment, you've stained the whole piece. and then that treats for the value modifier as an additional 10 gold pieces. And that process for staining or painting will take you an hour's worth of time. And you just kind of carve that time out, no pun intended, into kind of what your day actually looks like for your process. Otherwise, if you were going to waterproof or lacquer it, it'll take you additional time, but it will give you additional gold piece values. You can have different inclusions, which offer you a variable amount of value based on the inclusion, and you can also provide enchantments into the piece itself, but this can kind of vary in terms of a gold piece value and a time value. So what you're looking at in terms of inclusions can be different kinds of like wood or stone or metal, and then, you know, some sort of other item or whatever it might be, whatever object you would like to have as an inclusion within the piece itself. If the item has a gold piece value, then the value of that overall piece increases by the value of the inclusion added. So if you have a statue that you have carved and it has the ability to hold or have an inclusion that is a gemstone, you can take the value of the gemstone itself and add it straight into the piece itself, and that is the value of that overall carving and project. That way you can have a project that you've done well for relatively cheaper materials, and then basically supplement it with the massive sapphire that you found, and then put it into this thing's kind of inclusions. You can also then enchant. You must have access to any of the spells that you wish to include into the project piece. If you're not able to personally cast the spells at the required level, then you have to have somebody else do it for you. But the enchantment project window is variable based on the spell's level. However, the value does increase by a specific value per spell level. To permanently affix a spell within the item, though, you must succeed an intelligence check with the DC being 10, plus the spell's level, plus the size modifier of the piece for the project you've chosen. As seen on the project size and commitments table here, I know there's a lot of tables, we're getting through them, you can end up seeing that there's different sorts of limits on what pieces can hold what levels of spells. So a tiny piece can only hold up to a level 3 spell. And a gargantuan piece can only ever hold up to a 7th level spell, as is the nature of the materials you're working with and the size of the materials you're working with. Once the piece is enchanted, though, it can store one specific casting of the spell stored within it. Once that casting is spent, the piece becomes mundane and can be, but must be enchanted again using the same process. If a creature casts a spell through the object maintains concentration over kind of the window for the duration on behalf of the caster, as if the piece had cast the spell. However, it uses the Carpenter's Intelligence modifier plus their proficiency bonus as an attack bonus or save DC whenever applicable. That way it's treated as the artisan's skill, and it reflects the artisan's skill within there. So, what you're looking at in terms of actually putting spells in here is the DC to permanently affix is 10 plus the spell's level plus the size modifier of the piece. So, if it's 10 plus, I'm going to add a level 1 spell to a tiny object, though it's 10 plus 1 for the spell level, plus 1 for the DC modifier as seen on the table. From there, what you're able to do is take a look at the 2d4 plus 2 as the base time in hours, because it's 2d4 plus 2 for each spell level. And so if you were to be doing a level 2 spell, it would be 2d4 plus 2 plus another 2d4 plus 2 to be able to actually get the time spent to actually try to impart the spell on it. And then from there you can end up doing a check to complete and see at the end of each hour 10 plus the spell's level plus that size modifier to see how actually the spell kind of takes to the wood itself. All that you have to do from this point is actually succeed on over half of the total checks. And same kind of rules apply, natural 20s, natural 1s, 2 successes, 2 failures, that kind of a thing. If you succeed on over half, no big deal, spell is going to be able to be succeeded. But at the very end, if you aren't able to succeed on all of them and the spell does not take, then unfortunately it's not an enchanted piece. You do lose the gold pieces that are required to end up casting the spell and don't have the benefit of that spell there as well. Otherwise, the bonus for having an enchanted piece is it does give you 5d10 plus 2 for every spell level. So 5d10 plus 2 for a level 1 spell, 5d10 plus 2 twice, times 2 or times 3 for whatever the level is for level 2 and 3. Those kinds of things. So enchanting is a way that you can put a lot of value into a piece, but it also takes a lot of time. It has a certain amount of risk because you could be spending a spell slot that will be needed either for yourself or a party member for the day, or you could potentially be losing out on all of the benefits because it doesn't finally actually take to the wood. So that allows you to, for both on the road to some extent, but also more so like at home for downtime, to create different projects. Because if you have these projects, you can sell them in town or be working on them in places. Anything that would be a repair could be treated from anywhere from a tiny to a medium or a large for a repair project, and you end up just treating it as taking maybe half of the amount of actual time because you have the majority of the material there and you just need to do a repair. So these kinds of things allow you to earn funds, earn money based on actually having a trade. So objective 2 for Carpenters Tools is to highlight active production that highlights interest. Now, that's already kind of been achieved through objective 1, but what we will take a look at is how we can use Carpenters Tools a little bit more specifically on like an adventure. What I've given Carpenters Tools in proficiency with this is Carpenter's Expertise. You may add your proficiency bonus to any checks made to inspect or recall lore on carpentry and woodwork within the world. Similar to like a dwarves' stone cunning, where they have advantage in knowledge of stonework and stonecraft and carving. If you are a carpenter, you should be able to add your proficiency bonus so that you have some sort of understanding for a history check based on specifically carving, or perhaps an investigation check based on carving, other things like that, that specifically if you're trying to find some sort of information on potentially a ship or a ruin that happens to have like a wooden doorway or something, would be able to allow you to inspect and have some semblance of an idea as to this thing's construction and the craft that they do have available to it for this kind of a window. But ultimately it would depend on kind of what exactly you end up finding based on what your DM allows you to do with this skill. But this allows us to highlight Carpenter's Tools as an expertise based on your history as carpenter. You know kind of how pieces come together, and so you should be able to understand them when you do see them out and in the world. That's it for the Carpenter's Tools video. Stay tuned in the next video, we'll talk about another one of the Homebrew tools, but for now, that's kind of where we're at. Thank you all for watching. Remember, be good to one another, and I will see you next time. Bye!